Billy Napier is gone. The Florida Gators have their list. Lane Kiffin's at the top, and apparently there's some kind of offer. We'll talk about it all in this bonus episode of Locked On Gators.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to a bonus live episode of Locked On Gators, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free, obviously the podcast and on YouTube. As always, I am Brandon Olsen. Find all of my written work about the Florida Gators with swampsignal.substack.com. And the Florida Gators, of course, fired Billy Napier on Sunday, thankfully. We know that they've made offers to people, or that they've been, vetting people is the term that we're using to look to the background. We know that there's been a reported offer that I guess we can talk about that one first, right? Lane Kiffin is at the top of basically everybody's list. Like I said, if you want to tell me who you want, send your put your top three candidates, I guess, in the chat. We'll talk about basically everybody that we see there. What's up, Carlos? And yeah, Buddy Martin reported that there was a, 6-year, $13.5 million contract offer out to Lane Kiffin. I'll say this, and I said this to the Insider Program, which, by the way, is joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. The link's in the description below if you want to join that, where they get every bit of information before I put it out on the show. They get every bit of information before I put it anywhere else. And if you want to be a part of that, while we're talking about the coach hiring process, while we're talking about some of the assistants, go join that. You get 2 weeks free, and then it's $5 a month after that. And we will write about all these candidates on swampsignal.substack.com. But for the reported offer, I told them, I was told what a contract offer would look like or might look like. The numbers were similar to that. I was not told that a contract offer was made. And I do think that for a lot of people, when they talk about this estimated deal, it's in that same range. So I'm not saying that an offer was made. I really don't know if an offer was made. And that's all good. I'm not saying there was one. I'm not saying there wasn't one. But I will tell you that from what I was told prior to that report, those numbers are fairly similar to what's expected, which again is probably going to change, right? At some point, there'll probably be negotiations. Jimmy Sexton, best agent in the business for coaches. We know that there's at least been negotiations going on with Ole Miss. We've been hearing about that for a while now. What we've been told also is that, Ole Miss is really, really kicking up the negotiation lately, which honestly a bad move by their part. I do think that makes you look kind of, I don't know, it makes you look like you don't really operate with much foresight if you're just now getting on that extension. Where I think at least with Curt Cignetti and Indiana, you can go, all right, well, they weren't really expecting Penn State's job to open up, right? I don't think anybody was expecting James Franklin to get fired. I was told, hey, Cignetti would only leave for one of those big jobs in the area, mostly Ohio State and Michigan. I think the reason I heard that was because most people didn't think Penn State would open up. So when Penn State did open up, Indiana got on it, locked Curt Cignetti in long-term too. So that was the reported contract that came out. And again, you speak to, people on social media before that report came out by Buddy Martin were still guessing in that area. So it wouldn't be surprising or anything like that if that were the offer, whenever the offer is going to be made. The fully guaranteed part, I've spoken about this in the Locked On Gators Discord, which links in the description below. I hate the term fully guaranteed. Just because it makes me think of like an NFL contract, where NFL contracts are fully guaranteed, right? If they're fully guaranteed, the player has to stay for that entire amount of time and can't just choose to leave at any point. whereas the team will have to pay no matter what. But when someone says a fully guaranteed contract, I look at it, I guess, how Curt Cignetti's contract is shaped, where the school is going to pay him that full amount of money if they're the ones that terminate the contract. It's basically a buyout being at 100%. And so there's that. But again, I hate the term fully guaranteed because in the NFL, a fully guaranteed deal, a player can't just leave and go to another team at any time that he wants, right? Like he'd have to request a trade or request a release or whatever. Whereas with a coach, you just go. And like you have to pay the buyout, but that's that. So I hate the term fully guaranteed. I don't believe in that. It wouldn't shock me if that was a deal. It seems like that's kind of where we're shifting toward, which I kind of hate a little bit, honestly. I was thinking that a lot of teams would maybe go for lower salaries, maybe higher guarantees, but more salary or lower salaries, higher guarantees, and invest more money into the roster, in which case when you pick up the roster and they get better, then the coaches are put in better spots there. So I was hoping that, but it doesn't seem like we're going there that way. It seems like we're still bumping up those coaching salaries, still paying more, and the buyout and the roster and all that stuff. It's getting nuts, right? But that's all I have to say about that report for the Lane Kiffin contract offer. Reportedly, like I said, I cannot confirm that report. I can just say that a lot of the numbers are similar to what I've heard an offer would look like for Lane. And that's that. Like, I don't think that's surprising anyway. Like that's not any revolutionary information. That's nothing new there. We're going to look into the chat here for all the people talking. Yes, I said your top three, and we got Lane, Kiffin, no one else. Sure, setting yourself up for disappointment. And I will say this because I see a lot of people keep talking about, it's Lane or bust. It's Lane or nowhere else. And I hate that thinking because there are plenty of qualified candidates, but also even with Lane, like there's no sure thing. I've been talking about this. I wrote about it this morning for Swamp Signal when I was talking about Lane. Like Lane's the best candidate. Okay. I'm not taking anything away from that. I agree with that. I think that Lane is clearly the best candidate for this job. That being said, there's no sure thing. Like Lane could come here and not work out. Good. Like it's entirely possible. Lane can come here and not work out. Lane can come here and kind of check out. There's no sure thing. Every coach has risk attached to them. The thing that you're trying to do is find the coach that gives you the best chance to win a national championship while also limiting yourself risk-wise, while taking the safest option that's also the best option. That's Lane Kiffin. I'm not disputing that at all. I think that's what makes Lane the best candidate. That he is someone who's been in the SEC for years, won a lot of games in the SEC, and honestly deserves to be coach number one on most people's boards. Really does. He has risk attached to him. Could not work out. His recruiting hasn't been great. It's been better than most coaches have done at Ole Miss, and I think that he deserves to. Like, I think that when people talk about Lane Kiffin and what he's done at Ole Miss, they really don't use context properly, because you could talk about the top 10 and top 25 record. He hasn't had the resources to build a roster that puts him on the same level as a lot of these teams. Like, yeah, he's losing top 10 matchups because he doesn't have a top 10 roster. You look at at the teams that he's facing that have similar talent rosters, and he wins those games way more often than not. That's what's important, because when he comes to Florida, he's going to have a roster that is much more similar in talent to those top 10 teams. Like that's how I look at Lane Kiffin at Florida and how I try to project what he can do. I do think that basically every coach right now is someone that needs to be projected there. And so I think that that's important also, especially in this era of college football. I know you guys are talking in the chat. I'm still near the top. I see the new comment section. I just figured everybody's going to talk about Lane, so we're gonna start with Lane here. And we got time for this, so don't worry about that. But I think that when we talk about Lane, like, you need to take into account, yes, his record against top 10, top 25 teams. isn't great. His record against teams with similar talent, he's winning those games a lot. Like, he's losing the games where he's considerably less talented, where his team is considerably less talented. And I don't think that should be surprising. I do think that a lot of people, when they look at when they look at the, I guess, just the overall picture of what Lane's done, it's like, yeah, like he's been at the talent disadvantage for a lot of this, and he's won a lot of those games. And I think that's actually impressive what he's done. When they talk about his recruiting, let's say hypothetically he's not an awesome recruiter, right? Which again, he's recruiting at Ole Miss better than most coaches have recruited at Ole Miss. But let's say hypothetically he's not a great recruiter. Not a great recruiter at the University of Florida, winning games, which I do think that he'll win games with whatever roster he's able to get through the portal. But we're talking about high school recruiting. You talk about all that. I think that makes some things pretty, I don't know. Like it makes it easier to recruit this area. You're winning games at Florida. Kids are going to want to come play for you. You're winning games in Mississippi. Like, sure, you're going to get kids there, but in Mississippi, like a lot of those kids, you look at the top 10 kids in the state of Mississippi, or I think the top 12 are all blue chips. 2 of them are committed to Ole Miss. Everyone's committed elsewhere. The good players leave the state of Mississippi. Good players leave the state of Florida too, but a lot of good players stay in Florida. I do think that if Florida is winning, recruits will want to play there. Recruits will want to play for their home team, for their home state team. That's winning games. I think that makes it a lot easier. I think Florida genuinely recruits itself for a lot of these kids in state. I think Lane recruits himself for a lot of these kids. I mean, honestly, anywhere. So I do think that having Lane there winning games makes recruiting a lot easier. And I think that even if you're, like, hypothetically, let's say you're not getting a top 10 or 15 kid from the state of Florida. Let's say you're getting a bunch of kids that are in the 20s and 30s in Florida. Those are still blue chip players. Those are still damn talented football players. That matters. You have, yes, the competition of recruiting against Florida State, of recruiting against Miami, against recruiting against Georgia, against recruiting against Texas, all those things. Yes, there's a lot of volume in the state to find success. And again, if you're winning and it looks good and you're saying the right things, you're going to get a lot of those recruits. We're going to talk more about other candidates on this list. I try to go into this being like, all right, I'm going to spend a couple minutes on Lane and then move on. And then people just flood the chat with Lane. And I'm like, all right, well, now we need to talk about Lane in depth again. But we are about to talk about more candidates when we get back with Locked On Gators. This episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, they move culture, and they keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, it's Mekhi Boyro getting a pick, right? Like a nose tackle, getting an interception to win the game in what ended up being your head coach's final game. That was huge. And like watching that play as it happened, you saw Mekhi Boyro. I think we all saw Blake Shapen looking to that side, Mekhi Boyro dropping in coverage. And it's like, oh, we'll see how that goes. Like, I think a lot of people went back to LSU 3rd and 9 conversion with the 2 DTs dropping back into coverage. Mekhi Boyro gets a pick. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. And speaking of Mekhi Boyro, it's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving more every time you order. Mekhi Boyro delivered when it mattered most, right? Like, again, that game, Billy Napier almost gave Jeff Lebby his first career SEC win. As a head coach at Mississippi State. Almost gave him his first SEC win. But didn't happen because Jeff Lebby made a bad decision, which, by the way, makes me think Jeff Lebby just might not be it. And I picked Florida because I said, you got to prove to me that you can do it before I'm going to pick you to do it. That's what happens. So just like Mackay Boy Road delivered for the Florida Gators, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, tomorrow. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. Thanks again for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever it's in the podcast and on YouTube. And looking through this chat again, I am Brandon Olsen. Of course, this is a bonus episode. There's no breaking news. We're just talking about this Florida Gators coaching search, the list that people have, whatever that may look like. And if you want to throw names in there and you want to talk about names, we could talk about names. Zach Fink said Lane still hasn't signed his alleged contract extension. There is hope. Yeah, there's hope until he signs something. And I don't think that'll happen for a bit. So really, I don't look at this as something that's going to die down anytime soon. Or I think that news will die down, but I don't think because you're getting a response. I think it's just because you're going to have to sit and wait for some of these things. So there's that. I know that, yeah, Ole Miss is working on an extension. Until he signs it, it really doesn't matter to me. That's my general stance on it. You can make any offers you want. Florida can make offers. Whoever wants to make offers, make offers. Until that's signed, sealed, delivered, it's open. Swamp Talk with Tony said Lane, Dillingham, and Brom. We spoke about Lane. Dillingham, I really don't view as leaving Arizona State. Like, I view him as a potential Arizona State lifer. Won the Big 12 last year, made the college football playoff, took Texas to the wire, maybe with one missed call from a ref, he would have advanced, or from one made call from a ref, he would have advanced. I view him as an Arizona State lifer. I'd take him in a heartbeat. I view him as an Arizona State lifer. His alma mater, like I've said before, like the way that Kenny Dillingham, like he'll cry after big wins. He'll show his passion. He wears that on his sleeve for that school. I don't view him leaving. Jeff Brom, I have viewed him as a Louisville lifer. I know that on 3 Gators Online, I forgot which specific writer it was that wrote it, so I'm sorry. It might have been Zach Ebelverdi. Put that from people he spoke to, Jeff Brom would be willing to listen to the job if Florida came calling. I really do like Jeff Brom. I do view him as a Louisville guy. I know that he'd be willing to listen. Would he be willing to leave, though, or would he be willing to listen and turn that into an extension with Louisville? Again, an alma mater guy. And like I was in, if you're in the Twitter spaces, like, Q, I was in Q's Twitter space this morning and we were talking about Jeff Brom and but he's not going to win a national championship probably at Louisville. Like he's got this, that. And it's like, some people don't care about that. Like some people are just glad to see their program thriving and striving, and he's capable of doing that. Jeff Brom, great offensive mind. What he's done with quarterback has been great. He's consistently at least attempted to recruit the state of Florida. So he's got that. My thing with Jeff Brom is that he's won everywhere he's gone, right? Like he won games consistently at Purdue, and he's won games so far consistently at Louisville. He's got 8+ wins every year from 2021. That's impressive to do, especially when that conference has had, new names thrown into it. When that conference has had new coaches hired that become really like Miami's been very successful under Mario Cristobal, has not impacted Jeff Brom. Clemson, a little bit of a fall off. SMU came into the conference and started lighting things up right away. Florida State had their 13-0 season until 63-3. Jeff Brom's a great coach. I think he would be a fit at Florida in terms of like the attitude that he has and working out there. I don't think it happens is my point. And there's a lot of coaches that we could talk about and a lot of coaches that we will talk about where I will think that they'd be good hires, right? Like Lane's the top, but again, every coach has risk attached to them. It's about maximizing your potential, right? And so there are coaches that I think will work. Like, again, I think Florida's a great job, great backyard. You got great resources that whoever is hired, and Scott Stricklin pretty much said it. He's like, hey, whoever gets hired, you're going to have a lot of resources. Like we're going to give you those resources. Just because it didn't work with Billy doesn't mean we're not going to do it with you. So I do think that it's a fantastic job open. I think it's the best job available right now. And so I do think that with a lot of these coaches, like you need a good coach. And I will say this also for the people that bring up like a Will Stein. I don't want to go the coordinator route. I haven't spoken about Glenn Schumann. Like I don't want to go the coordinator route. I want someone who's going to lead this team. Like, I want someone who's going to be the guy leading this program. Like Lane Kiffin gave up play calling duties to Charlie Weiss Jr. That's like Charlie Weiss Jr. calls the plays. Lane Kiffin has input. He will override sometimes, but Charlie Weiss Jr., the play caller. That's important. Like stuff like that matters. In modern day college football, the head coach has so many responsibilities that you cannot be the head coach that actually runs the program and the offensive play caller or defensive play caller even. Like it's just not going to happen. And so with a lot of these guys, like that's why I'm not talking much about Will Stein. I'm not talking much about Ryan Grubb with Alabama. I don't talk much about him because I don't necessarily want a coordinator. Like I want a head coach. I want preferably someone that's been a head coach for a while that I can trust and say, hey, you know what? I think that he's going to be able to work out there. I think that he's proven that he could be a head coach. I think he's proven that he can win games. And I think that matters a lot, right? And Ryan Grubb has been a fantastic offensive coordinator. I thought that he got, I was going to say shafted with the Seahawks, but I don't even think it was that. I think it was just not a good fit. Like I just think it wasn't a good fit for the style they wanted to play. Like he wants to throw the football a lot. And Mike McDonald, defensive mind, like those guys don't usually want to get into shootouts. They don't usually want to air it out a ton. They usually want to go, all right, well, we're going to go ahead and just try to win this game, ball control, that kind of stuff. And there's defensive minded coaches that are fine airing it out a bit. In the NFL, that's really uncommon. In the NFL, Ryan Grubb wasn't the fit with Mike McDonald. So I just think that wasn't going to work out. Until Lane says no, I'm sticking with him. That's fine. But like, again, we're going to talk about candidates. Clark Lee, another great name. Like I do think he's a really good football coach. I think what he's done at Vanderbilt's been great. I think that teams are going to hold off on Clark Lee until they see him without Diego Pavia. And look, I've said this before. Like I give Clark Lee the credit for getting Diego Pavia. Like, yeah, Diego Pavia helps you win a lot of games. Yeah, that's your job as a coach to get guys that help you win football games. That's it. Diego Pavia is special in terms of what he does creating and extending plays, and that helps you a lot. And I think that the pause behind everybody just buying in fully is that that's not necessarily sustainable in the sense of when you get a new quarterback, you have no guarantee he's going to do that. Like you have no guarantee he's going to be that creative in the pocket or in the backfield at all. And I think that's one of the big concerns with Clark Lee. So I do think that right now, I don't think he's going to be brought up on a lot of these coaching hires or potential coaching hires. But I do think that if he has a year like next year without Diego Pavia and they have a good year, yeah, I think we're going to have conversations about Clark Lee being one of the hottest names available. I just think that it's going to take one more year without Diego Pavia. Nothing out of the ordinary. Lane, Eli, Jeff. No, I don't think we haven't spoken about Eli Drinkwitz today, if I'm not mistaken. But Eli Drinkwitz is a great candidate. I do think he's a great candidate, really. I know, and we spoke about him on this morning's episode of Locked On Gators, where people are I guess, let's say concerned. I forgot what the exact tweet was, but it was Hal Lewis, one of Florida's boosters, going on Twitter and saying like, Eli was, I think, 17 and 19 before he gave up play calling duties to Kirby Moore. And since then he's 27 and 6. And it's like, so if you hire Eli, then you're getting the 17 and 19 Eli Drinkwitz. And I don't think it's true. And the thought is that Kirby Moore might get a head coach job at Missouri. I don't know if that's true. It's possible. I don't know if that's true. But even if it is true that Kirby gets the head coach job, that doesn't mean that Eli Drinkwitz is going to come back and be the 17 and 19 Eli Drinkwitz. Eli Drinkwitz did the thing that Billy Napier didn't do that I think is very difficult to do. And I do think that coaches deserve more credit for doing it, of giving up offensive play calling duties. That is not an easy thing to do, especially when it's one of those situations where it's like, you need to give up offensive play calling duties or you're probably going to get fired, which is the situation that Eli Drinkwitz was in. It's a situation Billy Napier was in, right? Where guys go, hey, like, this is what got me here. And if I've got my future on the line, is that the time that I want to take a risk and put it in the hands of someone else? That's a really difficult decision to make. And Eli Drinkwitz made it. Like, Eli Drinkwitz said, hey, my future's on the line. Do I really want to put it in the hands of someone else? And I think the logic to fix that or to counteract that is play calling got you here, but play calling is also what has you on the hot seat right now. And so I think that when you talk about, oh, well, do I want to give it to someone else? It's like, well, keeping it in your hands is what has you potentially getting fired here. And so I think it's really important to acknowledge that Eli Drinkwitz made that tough choice. Like, yes, he hired Kirby Moore. Kirby Moore's been a great OC so far. And a lot of people will use that and say, like, oh, yeah, like, well, Eli, when he was before Kirby, Eli wasn't that good of a head coach. It's like, well, that's because Eli was calling plays, and once he gave it up, they started winning games. I don't know if Eli Drinkwitz is going to work out. I mentioned on this morning's episode, Sean Gleason is their quarterbacks coach. If Eli were the hire at Florida, and if Kirby Moore were promoted to head coach in Missouri, I would think Sean Gleason would come over, or potentially come over. Like, he'd be one of the names we talk about as offensive coordinator. But I do think that Eli, and I've said this before, like, I don't like Eli. I've met him. I thought he was a jerk. So I don't like Eli Drinkwitz, but I do think he's a good football coach. I do think they'd win games. I know he's, a dork, a dweeb, all that stuff. If you win me football games, I really don't care. And I do think Eli Drinkwitz is one of the better options available. Potentially. Again, I've said this before, like, I was told it wouldn't be likely for him to come here. This is before Billy was even fired. I was talking to people about the potential of, hey, if Billy's fired, what do you think about this coach? And I was told that it didn't seem likely that Eli would come to Florida. And so we'll see that, but it does seem like things have kind of maybe shifted based on the public noise around Eli Drinkwitz. So maybe that's changed. Sean Abel said Jed Fish. I've said before, like, Jed Fish, for me, the biggest plus for him is that he's a Florida alum. And like I mentioned with alma maters, I do think it matters. I do think that leads you to a more successful partnership there. But I hate that that's your big selling point. I hate that your big selling point is, hey, he's a Florida alum. To me, that's not a good selling point. It's not a strong selling point at all to be your first one. Yeah, fun offenses. Arizona, Washington. He's had some games where it's not gone great for him as the offensive guy. But I think for me, the biggest concern I have with Jed Fish is, one, I'm not sold he's a top flight coach to be talked about in this like top coach. Like, if you get to coach 5 or 6 and that's your option, then sure, maybe. But he's never stayed in a spot. Like, people leave these comments when I talk about Lane Kiffin and they go, oh, well, Lane Kiffin doesn't stay in spots. And it's like, okay, well, he kind of does. He was at USC for 3 or 4 years before getting fired. Then he went to Alabama for 3 years as an offensive coordinator. Then he got a head coaching job at FAU, and he was there for 3 years, won the conference championship twice. And then he got a Power 4 head coaching job, an SEC head coaching job with Ole Miss, and he's been there for 6 years. So this whole like, oh, he doesn't stick, but the same people want Jed Fish is crazy to me, because Jed Fish has bounced around every time. Like, he stays for 2 years and leaves. And more power to you, but like, if we're going to bring concerns and questions about coaches, like, let's be fair and let's bring them for the same thing. Like, I think it's very valid. I just hate the whole, like, I'm only going to acknowledge the good with the coach that I want and only going to acknowledge the bad with other coaches. I just hate that. Just be honest. That's it. We got a bunch of deal him decent cash and outrageous incentives. Yeah, I would think that'd be a thing. How would you feel if we get Drinkwitz instead of Lane? Drinkwitz is a coach I'm fine with. Like, there's a lot of coaches that I'm like, all right, I'm cool with. I think you can win football games here. I think Lane would be the coach that I know Lane would be the coach that I'd be most excited for. I think if Lane says no, then I'll truly know how I feel about the other candidates. Like, it's like that thing where you tell someone and it's like, oh, like, do you want to do this? And they're like, I don't know. And you go, all right, then we're not going to do that. And they go, no, wait, no, actually, I do want to do this. I think that's where I'm at with the other coaches, where I'm just like, do you want to do this? Like, do you want to hire Eli? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't think I'd hate hiring Eli. But I, like, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking hire Lane. If Lane says no, then I'll truly like know how I feel about these things. But I do think that on paper, when we talk about on field, even Eli's a good coach. So that's where I'm at with it. I would not listen to any contract news for a while. But yes. Yeah, I'm not listening. I'm not believing any of these, by the way. I'm not believing any reports about contracts, especially because they don't matter right now. Like nothing is getting signed until after the season. We've got what, 6 weeks, 6 weeks until then. I just bit my lip. 5-6 weeks until then. Nothing matters until then. 30-minute mark here. Like, subscribe, comment, review, do all that stuff. We're going to talk about these coaching hires for a long time. Probably for this entire time until the coach is signed. What about Cliff from the Commanders? I hate Cliff Kingsbury. I would hate that hire. Like, there are not a lot of coaches that I say I would hate the hire. Cliff Kingsbury is a coach that I would hate the hire. I do not think he's a good head coach. I'm not even, honestly, I don't love him as an OC either. So I don't think he's nearly as great as people talk about. Congratulations on having these high-powered offenses for a couple years at Texas Tech. Like, they're like, sure, good, productive there. But like, he wasn't a good football. They weren't winning football games. I don't want him at all. Like, I don't want Cliff Kingsbury. I don't think he's good. He would be way down my list of candidates. Who's on your first tier of coaches? Had I had like the entire country available, it would have been Dan Lanning. It would have been Lane Kiffin. It would have been Marcus Freeman. It would have been Kurt Cignetti, or the entire country of like reasonable coaches, you know. But Lanning, too expensive. Kurt Cignetti, recently extended. Marcus Freeman, I think, too expensive. And Lane's the guy. Like, Lane's the only tier 1 coach that I have left. It's why I'm so confident that I'm in on him. Drinkwitz 6-7, 6-7 for 2 seasons. Yes. And then he gave up play calling duties and they won a lot more football games. That's the important thing. He made the tough call. Lane only is not a real business lane. Sure, I want Lane. Got to get real with alternatives as well. Absolutely. Could you make that same argument about James Franklin if you consider Penn State a tier 2 Big Ten school? I don't know what the point, like at what point in my conversation you said that. You said that 20 minutes ago. But your next message is, could James Franklin actually win if at a tier 1 school like UF? Here's my thing with James Franklin. I skipped to the bottom. So if you have something that you want to be brought back to the attention, send it again. I skipped to the bottom. I was taking way too long working down the list. James Franklin is a name that the more I think about it, the less I like it. That's where I'm at with it with James Franklin. Is the more I think about it, the less I like it. James Franklin, there's a few fatal flaws he's had, and it really concerns me. I fully understand people saying, well, you know, at Florida, it'd be easier to get these big athletes because he's had, you know, first off, he's been able to get elite defensive players consistently. Like he's had the Abdul Carters, which, yeah, maybe I'm a little biased, but like, I love Abdul Carter. I thought he was fantastic. The Micah Parsons. He's been able to consistently, like Odafe Owe, he's consistently gotten really, really good edge rushers, especially. It's like in Florida, you can typically, like, there's typically some real talent there. And so I look at that as an easy selling point. Offensive line, he's consistently gotten guys to the NFL and they've worked out. And so I do think that it's like, because I do think it matters if you go, okay, like you got drafted in the first round, but then they flame out. Sometimes like college coaches will get that blame. Like college coaches will get that blame of not preparing guys for the NFL and them just getting drafted off potential, right? Sometimes fair, sometimes not. but they've gotten to the league under James Franklin and they've worked. Running backs, he's had quite a few. Malik, I'm glad that you mentioned that name. We'll talk about it in a minute. He is on my tier 3 list of like really just swinging for the fences. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. But with James Franklin, like he's had some fatal flaws, and one of them is that he has gotten in his own way in quite a few areas. One of the things he's done is that he consistently screws the quarterback evaluation consistently. And if it's not the evaluation, it's the development. Every couple of years, we talk about this Penn State quarterback that gets first round hype and then they flame out and they do awful. That matters, right? A few years, they've had wide receiver development issues where they bring in the athletes and they don't develop them. And it's like, all right, well, and maybe he changes the staff, right? But I'm not banking on maybes. I'm banking on what he's shown me to this point. And so there's been that. He hired Andy Kotelnicki, one of the most creative offensive play callers in the country from Kansas, and put him in a box schematically. And I hate that like hiring a good offensive coordinator and then not letting him be himself is a stupid decision. You hire a great offensive coordinator to do what they're doing. Like if they're known for being this creative offensive mind and then you put them in a box, you're failing them. That makes it a bad hire, not because of them, but because of you. So James Franklin is a name that the more I talk about, the less I like, right? And I do think there's a very valid argument of while he was at Penn State, he needed to basically beat Ohio State and Michigan most of the time, and they failed to do that consistently. Like, yes, he won the Big Ten one time, but he failed to do anything with any sort of consistency, and that matters when you go, okay, you had to beat those two teams and you couldn't do it. Now in the SEC, you're going to be running juggernauts week in, week out. I have no faith in him to be able to do that. I really don't. So that's a big concern for me with James Franklin. The more I think about him, the less I like him, simply put. Mike McDaniel, I see people mentioning a few times. No, he's never coached college football. I don't like him. I don't think he's a good head coach. I don't know why people want him. Being a good schemer does not make you a good coach. And even then, like he's still got, first off, the offensive line has been completely overlooked, and he's been there long enough to say that he's part of the problem there. Like he's in year 4. The offensive line is still overlooked, not invested in enough, not working. You can't run that offense that he wants to run without a good offensive line. I have no idea what his coaching ties would look like. I am firmly against NFL coaches. Really am, except maybe a couple of exceptions. But even then, I don't know who those exceptions are. I'm firmly against NFL coaches. I do not think it's easy to go from the NFL to college. I don't think it's easy to go from college to the NFL. If we're talking about scheme stuff, it's really different. You can do different things in college than you can do in the NFL. Mike McDaniel is not a good coach. I don't want someone fired. And I do think that a lot of his sarcastic personality, I do think would go poorly with a lot of players. The only Florida ties, like to the state of Florida, that Mike McDaniel has is with the Miami Dolphins, and that's been horrible. Like these kids are not going to be like, oh yeah, well you were, an assistant with that one Washington staff that has a ton of OCs from it now. Like no one's going to care about that. So I don't think it matters for Mike McDaniel. I don't think he's a good football coach. I do not want him here. I don't think you win football games with him. Someone mentioned, who was it that said that? Malik C said, what about North Texas coach Eric Morris? And I have a list of, what is it? Is my tier 3 is my hope we don't get here category. I'm going to be honest. Because if we do, then that means we missed on a lot of names. But in that list, Eric Morris is in there. Fun air raid style that a lot of Florida athletes would thrive in. Need to figure out defense. I do think that there have been a couple times he got boat raced, but I also think, he's at North Texas. I don't know what their NIL is like. So I don't know what he'd be able to really do there long term, but like he was at Incarnate Word with Cam Ward, was at Washington State with Cam Ward, and then took the head coaching job at North Texas. I feel like he's someone that when a Texas job opens up, he's going to be near the top there. Played for Texas Tech, coached in Texas, like he coached at Houston, coached at Texas Tech, coached at Incarnate Word, coaching at North Texas. I think he's someone that's waiting for a Texas Tech job, probably to open up, but I think anything in the state of Texas is what he's really looking at. And so I don't know if that's really going to be a thing for him. He's a really fun candidate. Record's not great, but again, like when we talk about some of these G5 schools where there might not be super heavy investments in, I do think it matters to acknowledge that, like, yeah, your record might not be great, but part of that is probably because of your resources, but also at the same time, I don't know what you would be like with better resources. I think it would be great to have a guy like Eric Morris to sustain the offensive, or to sustain the Texas pipeline. But as far as being a head coach, I'm good on that, honestly. Again, he's on the list of the hope we don't get here category, but if we miss out on a bunch of other names, we'll be throwing his name out there. Ryan Silverfield is also on my list. And honestly, another guy that I'm not a big fan of. I think that he's, a fun offensive mind sometimes. I think that he's done some creative things, especially in the run game. But he had and he is from Florida, by the way. I want to make that clear. So he does have, in-state ties to an extent. But he hasn't really coached in Florida, and I do think that matters. He's got, I think it's 2 or 3 years at UCF, like 20 years ago. Coached at Toledo, which I will always shout out. Coached at Arizona State, went to the NFL, went back to Memphis. An O-line guy automatically makes him kind of fun. He was the offensive line coach when Mike Norvell, I believe he was the coach when Mike Norvell left for Florida State, and then he took over as the interim, and then he got hired full time. I don't hate him, but he's not someone that I'm a fan of. And if we get to that hope we don't get here tier, then again, so be it. They've won games at Memphis. They're 6-1 right now. They've had 2 10-win seasons under him. But I'm not fully bought in on a guy from Memphis like that. Mr. Bassman said, so can we talk about Lane now? We talked about Lane for 20 minutes to start the show. I don't think it was 20, but we spoke about Lane for a lot of this show. If we hire Mike McDaniel, I will find a new team to root for, said Zach Fink. Yeah, that's not too bad there. Let's see, were there any other coaches that got brought up? But yeah, with Ryan Silverfield, I think he's really good at Memphis, honestly. I just don't know how he's going to translate as a P5 coach, and I think that that's fair to question. I feel like he's had first few years built up the program. Past couple years has done really well in the conference, has been ranked. Him getting boat raced by USF last week or a couple weeks ago definitely doesn't help the perception around him. Someone mentioned Major Applewhite. No, thanks. I'm good on Major Applewhite. I will say that. I will say that. Got fired from Houston. Had some issues, I'll say, at Houston with Ed Oliver and a couple other guys. So I'll say I'm good on that. By the way, he's currently at USA, South Alabama. So he's there. He's a head coach. Let him stay there. He's a G5 coach, lifer, probably where he belongs. Mr. Bassman, we spent a lot of time talking about Lane. So there's that. The only thing I'm getting out of this show today is that Lane is the only one who makes the most sense. I hope we can get him. Look, we'll wrap up with this. Lane is the coach that makes the most sense for Florida. I'm not going to say he's the only one who makes the most sense, only because there can only be one person that makes the most sense. So I guess you could say that, yes, but I just like reading that and saying that out loud makes it sound like it's like, oh, Lane's the only good candidate. And that's not true. Okay. But Lane is, in my opinion, pretty easily the best candidate for this job. I mentioned earlier, like my list included Marcus Freeman at the top. It included Lane Kiffin at the top because I did tiers. I didn't care about 1, 2, 3, 4. I did tiers. And in tier 1, it had them. Marcus Freeman, we've been told, like, isn't likely because a big buyout, which I don't doubt Notre Dame has money to do that, private institution, so that doesn't need to be public information. But we were told last December when he signed an extension with Notre Dame that, hey, a big part of that extension was giving him a big buyout bump. It used to be like $4 million. So had you fired Napier last year and hired him, then yes. Lane also needs to know if he stays at Ole Miss after this round, he's probably done for life. Florida probably. Who's the better coach out of all Florida Gators head coach candidates? I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean with that. Frankly, like we're talking about all the coaches, right? We're talking about the great coaches. But I do think that Edward Suggs says, who besides Lane Kiffin will be able to hit the ground running here? Yes, if Lane Kiffin comes, I do think attrition will be great. Like, I don't think you're going to lose many guys. If he brings Pete Golding back from Ole Miss, if he brings him with him, maybe you swing for a big name DC, maybe. Like, I really don't know what that would shape up like, but I do know that a lot of defensive players want to play on a team with a really good offense because they know if they do their job, they're winning games. Like this year, a lot of these defensive players, I would imagine, I'm not speaking to them, I'm not speaking for them, I would imagine that a lot of these defensive players probably get frustrated at times when this offense has been as awful as it's been. They probably go, yeah, like, we've been playing great defense and we're losing games because this offense can't do their damn job. And so, and like, as a defense, like, you can only do so much, right? Like, you can only do so much. This game is geared for offenses. And so I do think that if you're a defensive player and Lane Kiffin's the hire, and it's like, okay, well, we know our offense is going to be good with that. We have the talent on defense. We can get stops, and Lane will win a shootout with just about anybody, right? And I do think that matters. So I think that Lane Kiffin, great for attrition. A lot of guys wouldn't leave. Marcus Freeman, one of my reasons. Like, my tier 1 list was immediate college football expectations and keeping the roster intact. Lane, Marcus Freeman, Dan Lanning, Curt Cignetti. Dan Lanning and Curt Cignetti were off the board before Napier even got fired there. You look at tier 2W is what I had, which are Power 4 winners. And I do think that a lot of them have a potential to keep most of the roster. Jeff Brom would be one. I do think that he'd be able to keep quite a few guys on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that, again, in turn, that keeps guys on defense. James Franklin, maybe I'd be interested to see how that would go. He's got a great reputation, right? As far as success throughout a lot of these guys' career. Like, a lot of these players, when they're, 19, 20, James Franklin's been the head coach at Penn State for most of their life. And that matters. Like, seeing, like, oh, this guy's been here for a long time. Successful. Never reached the pinnacle, but successful. Got close a few times. Maybe we can help him get there. So I do think that would matter. I think that there are quite a few guys that if you brought them in, you can sell to this roster. You do. And the thing is, when a new coach is announced and hired, then the portal opens 5 days later. That gives you time to... Ryan Day is not leaving Ohio State for another college job. If Ryan Day leaves Ohio State, he's leaving for the NFL. Simple as that. That's just what it is. If Ryan Day leaves Ohio State, it's for the NFL. A lot of these guys want to go to the NFL. But I think that there are a lot of guys where, again, a coach gets hired and then 5 days later, the portal opens for that roster. I think in those 5 days, you have a lot of coaches that can make a lot of moves with this roster and have a lot of conversations to keep this roster intact. Like, I think that if you say, hey, we're hiring Jeff Brom, Jed Fish even, James Franklin, Brent Key maybe, Eli Drinkwitz. Like, there's a lot of names out there where I do think you should say, hey, we have 5 days to lock guys in, NIL wise, tell them what our plans are with coordinators and make them happen that way. I think that's very possible. I do. I think Lane sells himself, and that's the big selling point here for retaining the roster. But I do think that there's a lot of options that could keep a lot of this roster intact. I think if you go like a G5 route, like a Ryan Silverfield, like people have mentioned, like Alex Golesh, who no one mentioned, but honestly, I feel like he probably should be brought up more. Like if Florida goes a G5 route, I look at Alex Golesh as like the top name to be brought up. High octane offense, 2 top 25 wins this year. Got USF to invest more in the NIL side of things than ever before. Psycho mentality wise, like, yeah, I think that he would be near the top of the name for G5. But like if you got like a Ryan Silverfield, I don't know, who's another name people brought up? Eric Morris. Like if you bring those, you're gonna have a lot of roster attrition probably. Maybe not receiver, maybe not quarterback, but a lot of guys are probably gonna be like, I'm not sure about that one. I got other Power 4 offers there. And like I don't know, RCL MX 159 said, then Freeman goes to Ohio State. Yeah, if Ryan Day leaves to the NFL, Marcus Freeman's going to Ohio State. It is what it is. That's just how it would work there. Then you probably see Mike Denbrock become the head coach at Notre Dame maybe, and then that'll be the internal hire again. But yeah, that's what it looks like there. Thanks for making this bonus live episode of Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever the podcast and on YouTube. We've got fun plans for next week. It's Georgia week. We're still going to talk coaching hires. We're still going to talk the game. Like we're going to talk about football games. Okay, they're being played. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about the coaching hires as well, but we're going to talk about these football games as well. So thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free wherever the podcast and on YouTube. Find all my written work about the Florida Gators with swampsignal.substack.com. Join the insider program at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnGators. And as always, I will see you all next time.